Hi, it's Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO here in beautiful Montreal, welcoming you to another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. We're part of Fractional Pros Canada, the home for Canada's fractional community, and you can find us on Facebook. We bring you conversations about everything fractional that matters for fractional executives and businesses from coast to coast. Think of this as your go-to spot for real talk, practical wisdom, and strategies you can actually use, all without the corporate fluff and with plenty of Canadian content. Whether you're a fractional pro or a business in our great country of Canada and beyond, this conversation is for you. Grab your espresso and let's dive in. Welcome to the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. I'm your host and fractional CMO, Robert Mendelson. Sort of here in beautiful Montreal, actually on the road today, doing this from a co-working space for the first time, bit of an experiment. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see I kind of look like a boy in the box, which if you're a true Canadian, you recognize that as one of Corey Hart's famous tunes, who is from Montreal, thus the whole Montreal segue. My guest today is a man who has lived multiple professional lives, from over 3 decades in high-tech international sales to a deep personal journey into leadership coaching. Joining us from Cantley, which is in the Ottawa region, is Kim Tofin. He is the founder, CEO, and Teamship catalyst at Breakout CX, the developer of the Teamship-infused leadership methodology. And Kim is on a mission to help leaders and teams dismantle silos and unleash their full collaborative potential. He also serves as the Ottawa chair for McKay CEO Forums. And today's Fractional Pros Canada podcast, powered by YourCMO.ai. Streamline your marketing and business processes with AI-powered automation tools that are tied to your CMO's proven process for predictable growth. Learn more at YourCMO.ai. That's YORCMO.ai. Kim, welcome to the Fractional Pros Canada pod.
Good morning, Rob, and thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. And I'm going to start off. You are exceptionally open, Kim, about your personal life journey. You're really like an open book. People go onto your about page on your website, and you just tell it all. Father of 2, passionate traveler, food enthusiast. You spent 4 years with your late wife working and traveling in Africa and Asia. Which, by the way, tell us a little bit. What was that like for traveling for 4 years? That sounds. A lot of people think about doing that, but like, nah, that'd be too crazy. I'm never going to do that. How did that work out for you?
Well, it was too crazy. How am I going to do that? Right. That's where it started. My wife and I realized shortly after we were married that we were closet travelers. And so we had this plan after I finished an oil and gas project in Edmonton that we would plan to take a several months sabbatical to Southeast Asia. That's how it started. And, at that point, when we started focusing on the probability or the possibility of doing something like that, we had to wrestle with our own values and what was important to our lives individually and together collectively. And that was the time that me in particular, because it was my journey at that point. Carol did it her way, but I really began to reach inside and come to terms with my own values of life. And once I did that change, the rest of it just unfolded. And I was fine with all the decisions to pack up after the project was over and head out. And it started out as 6 months, then it went to 9 months, then a year. And once we were on the road, it just kept going and going. And we spent the better part of the last year in Japan, and we were working, and I got involved in some really fascinating partnership projects at that point. So we traveled for 3 years, and it was amazing. It's defined me.
That's so amazing, because there's probably a bigger percentage of people who have said, all right, I'm going to take off maybe a couple months, maybe 6 months, travel a certain region, and then, after that, coming back home and getting back to my regular life. And there must have been a point for you when you were, towards the end of that, first forecast kind of deadline date of like, okay, and then I'm coming back home, where you made that decision? You know what? I'm not going back home yet. We're not done. Like what happened to catalyze that?
I think it was having realized the potential in me, which I think is the potential in all of us, and acting upon it, and having and finding the courage to do what was important at the time. And I was thirsty for learning, thirsty for experiencing other ethnicities and cultures and foods, and it just seemed like there was no other way. And I guess it was really just coming in contact with my life's purpose at that moment. And I I knew there were risks. I knew there were um, unknowns, what it would be like at the end of the journey, whenever that would be. But I was confident and grounded in my purpose. And it's really back then when I heard about the concept of following your North Star, and it's that whole concept and belief has stayed with me since then.
So many people have trouble. We all of us have heard that, follow your North Star, but so many of us are like, I keep looking up, but I don't see my star. Right? Is there?
Well, that's interesting. And your graphical um, image of looking up to find the North Star, even though we do look up to see the physical North Star in the universe, excuse me, um, I think the human personal North Star is inside. I think we don't have to look for it. It's there. We have to just recognize it and feel it. And I think once we start doing that, it's a whole game change of how we move forward with our life and our purpose, and what matters the most to us.
I don't want to go down this rabbit hole of personal development and North Star searching, but I feel like I need to ask you, because you seem to be one of the few people I've spoken to who's done it so successfully. If you could give us, like, is there one tool or tip or technique that you have since figured out is a great way to at least get on the right path towards figuring out what, my North Star is?
That's such a great question, Rob. Because I've been asked it in many ways in different times of my life, either as a coach, as a team coach, executive coach, or just sitting around a fire or sitting around a table full of nice cold pints. I think if there's one thing that I have found that works for me, and I continue to work on this because I don't think we ever really reach completion, and that is self-awareness. And I think we have to be okay with absolute, genuine self-awareness. And once we're able to become aware of how we're responding, how we're communicating, how we're interacting, how we're feeling, and how we're sensing the feelings of other people, because that's part of our self-awareness, I think that a lot of things begin to change. And that's hard. That's really hard. And I haven't mastered it. I slip into, automatic pilot, and, I gotta remind myself, okay, how are you feeling right now? Like what's going on? And that's self-awareness. And I think that's a sort of a superpower for me anyway.
Yeah, thank you for being so vulnerable, because there's a lot of people who listen to other people who are celebrities and have a lot of money, and you always see their A game, and you don't hear about the other side of what happens when they're not, behind the mic or behind the in front of the mic, in front of the camera, and that they still struggle. And even the people that we think have figured it all out, it's not quite it's not quite the story. That's not the whole picture. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. So let's take all that experience you have, the big work experience, the big travel, you come back. How does that all tie into what you started doing when you got back and what you're doing today?
Well, to give you a sense of what was going on when we got back to something called software on personal computers, 286s and Word Perfect and Lotus 123 and DBase 4.
You're making me feel
And,
old.
and it was, yeah, but it was like, it was culture shock, technical shock. And so I went back to my alumni university where I studied management at the University of Lethbridge in Alberta, just to get myself reoriented and recalibrate myself. Um, but that was really just the functional part of my life. Um, I think what really drove me, and it did two things. It made me realize, okay, well, I'm lost right now. I have no idea what we're going to do. Same with Carol, but we're in a good spot. There are billions of people who don't know where the next meal is going to come from. And that was really humbling. And that was very fresh in my mind and my memory. And we just started to we started to believe that um, let's follow that North Star. What do we want to do? What's going to be important for us? And when the resistance come in, we were just like water. While we moved around it, we stayed fluid, and we started doing a lot of things. Like I taught English as a second language at the University of Lethbridge for a year. Like that was not on the game plan. So it just started, and um, yeah, it was, there was really no concrete plan, um, but I was always responding to what was in front of me and what would I have to do. It's kind of like working from both the inside and the mind at the same time.
And you share also very openly that your coaching journey, that part of your life where you started doing the coaching thing, as they say, which was around 2011, I think, was kind of reignited after the loss of your wife, who was your best friend, your life partner, a major life-changing event. And then subsequently, Breakout CX was reborn in 2020 with a new mission. So tell us about that kind of transformation.
So okay, that's interesting. And so let me do a minor or modification to the
Yeah, please.
timeline. So you're right. The coaching began officially, formally in about 2011. I was laid off from Autodesk because they disbanded the North American government team. And that hit me like a bullet. Um, but by that time, I was already doing sort of pseudo coaching and mentoring. And I had several months off in between jobs. And I said, I'm going to go explore this leadership coaching. So just as a sidebar, Carol did not pass away till 2020. So that was the beginning of my leadership coaching. And I studied with Doug Silsby down in North Carolina with presence-based coaching, presence-based leadership, through myself at a couple on-site retreats, full on for like 10-day retreats. Got certified, and that's when Breakout began. But then I got lured back into industry and back into the high tech and traveling. And so I did my coaching on the side, but not full time. And then when my wife passed away in 2021, that's when I went back inside and said, okay, what do we do? And I had to recalibrate. And that's when I went back to my same coaching school, reset my coaching, and reshaped Breakout to essentially what it is today. But in that process of getting back into coaching full time, because I realized at that point I needed to stop being a road warrior and spending 2 weeks a month on a plane, I encountered team coaching. And that was a very pivotal part of my coaching world or my coaching journey, because I really hadn't known about team coaching. I knew about group coaching, but team coaching was something new. And then I threw myself at that. I spent 8 months on a very intensive diploma mastery course with Team Coaching Studio out of London, UK, which was absolutely amazing. And that's where my coaching journey began. And I've been really focusing a lot on that while still doing leadership coaching because it's all tied together.
And so you mentioned the difference between team coaching and group coaching. Maybe just tell us what that difference is.
So group coaching is taking the leadership coaching approach, modalities, models, and rather than coaching one-on-one with a leader, an executive, or just your client one-on-one, you're in a room, of maybe six. It shouldn't be much larger than 7 or 8, but you're doing coaching, leadership coaching, to a group of individuals at the same time. And it can be very, very effective, very powerful in certain settings. But for me, I found that I couldn't go as deep as I would if I'm one-on-one with somebody, for the obvious reasons, because you may not know these other people and you just can't go as deep. So that's group coaching. It's essentially one-on-one coaching en masse.
It's one to many. Okay.
Yeah.
And then team coaching, this is different because now it's not just a random group of people who've gotten together in the same room. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that a team is defined as a group of people who already are hopefully swimming in the same direction, working at the same company or something along those lines.
Yeah, exactly, Rob. And hopefully is the definitive word, because there are a few characteristics of teams, and not to go too deep into the weeds, but one of the key factors of being able to effectively coach a team and have a team progress from being functional to high performing and even high impact is that the team has to be aligned on a common purpose and common goals, and they need to be supportive by an organization, a sponsor, and they need to be cross-functional. So, for example, if I'll just use this as an example. Customer support teams, they're called teams. And so, I've been called in to work with a customer support team that's having problems because of different, too many business units within the organization, too many levels of software on different versions, etc. And so we're trying to get everybody on the team, the customer support team, coalesced. But really, that's a working group because they're all doing the same thing per se. They all have a job description, and that's what's driving them at work. A real team is, and it could involve customer support, because maybe there was an acquisition and there's a new company, their whole technology portfolio has brought into the organization, and now they're trying to integrate not only the technology and the deliverables, but the customer support. So that becomes maybe a 12 or 18-month project. And so there's some real goals at the end of it. But it's impacting more than just the people behind the desk. It's impacting sales, it's impacting marketing, it's having an effect on finance and operations. So then the team that's brought together to fast track and to make sure that integration is successful becomes that powerful team potential that will benefit from good team coaching. Now, do they need team coaching? No, they don't. But the problem is that management tries to brings in a coaching mindset, which is fine and it's wonderful. But management actually, or a VP of sales or somebody, they could be part of the problem, or they could be the obstacles, or worse, they could be sucking all the oxygen out from that team. So there needs to be accountability, and there, of course, that effective team has to deal with psychological safety and how to deal with conflict and how decisions are made. And this is where a team coach can come in, because they're neutral, and they hold that container for that team. So that was a lot I threw at you there, but just to give you an example, probably better than trying to explain it all.
Right. And of course, one of the pieces I really loved is one of the last things you said, that because you are coming in as an outsider, you are not part of whatever politics and other daily whirlwind stuff is happening there. You're coming in and you're just delivering the goods, so to speak. And of course, that's what the fractional value proposition is all about. So I love that you mentioned that as well. So you're all about, you use the word teamship, right? And I assume, is this a combination of team and friendship? Is that where teamship comes from?
That's so interesting. I started using Teamship shortly after I got involved in team coaching. I stumbled across the word, and I used it in a presentation or a document, and I realized it was not in the Microsoft dictionary, the standard dictionary. I get a little red squiggly line under it. I'm going, whoa, what's this? Do I have to hyphen it, or and it's just not a commonly used word. So, but I found it was a popular word because we spend so much time and money on leadership, leadership skills development, and the importance of leadership in the organization. But teamship doesn't really get much airtime, and so my mantra, my sort of brand is teamship infused leadership, infusing teamship into leadership, and teamship then becomes the glue. It becomes part of the organizational culture to bring in a lot of the other EQ/soft skills that companies are now wanting and recognizing that this is also important to instill into the overall culture of the organization. It's not just IQ and performance driven traits. Both are necessary. It's not one replacing the other, but we need both. So that's really the teamship story. And I will just mention on that, last year, about this time, a great author who I've become friends with, Keith Ferrazzi, who many years ago wrote Never Eat Alone.
Right.
Published, and that was a book about networking and relationship building, and it stood the test of the time. He's revised it. It's a great read. It just is such a good read. But he came out with a book this fall called Never Lead Alone, and about transitioning or including teamship with leadership. And I was just so amazed that now suddenly the word teamship is on the New York bestselling list, right? And so I did a podcast with him on that, and it was wonderful, because no one has ever talked about teamship before. And if Keith Ferrazzi's talking about it, that means something.
That's cool. And yeah, that was a great book, and that concept of never eat alone. Like, it's kind of like everybody needs to eat. The more people interact with each other, the better. And there's something really special about, for me at least, especially what I call collisions with strangers. And these are like just random interactions with a stranger that might last no more than 30 seconds. Yeah, it makes my day. And I'm actually going to share this story because it's still with me. It happened last week. I was sitting in the Jardin Botanique, the Botanical Gardens of Montreal, which is right near where I live. Go there often. Sitting there on a bench, absorbed in catching up on my emails and LinkedIn messages. And there's this girl who's alone, and I'm looking over a beautiful, like a postcard view. There's a small little pond, and there's, some ducks and some trees. There's beautiful scenery. And she comes over to me, says, "Can you take my picture, please?" And she was clearly not from here. She was
my guess is going to be Japanese because she did a lot of bowing at the end after in gratitude, and she was so
Yeah.
polite. So I take her picture, take a couple of pictures, give her back the camera, and she's like smiles at me, thank you. And then I see her look at the pictures, and she goes, "Wow." She goes, and then she looks at me. She goes, "Oh wow, these are really good." And that was it. And then she walked off. And that whole thing lasted, what, 40 seconds? But man, that made my day. I felt so good. Like I just did something, I helped somebody out. It was totally random, wasn't planned, made somebody happy. And those kinds of random collisions with strangers, I think is a lost art, right? You get on the subway or the bus now if you're doing the public transit thing, and people are either got their heads down in their phones or they're just staring into space. And I think pre-screen times, if we can call them that, there was a lot more of that kind of random interaction going on than there is now. And it's kind of a lost art. So going back to Never Eat Alone, it's a great way to kind of try and compensate for what we've lost a lot of, which is that, you know, be together more and break the isolation, which seems to be growing in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love it. And I think that for me, when I read Never Eat Alone years ago, I was traveling a lot and I was eating alone a lot. And so the title really captured me. So after I read that book, as a businessman, I would tend to then go and sit at the bar,
Yeah.
not to drink per se, but to eat. And then there's always a conversation that's going to
Yeah.
start there. Um, and it's really important to build that relationship and that network. I mean, so today I still work with Connected Success with which is a Keith Ferrazzi organization with Beyond Connections, and I'm a mastermind coach with that organization. And well, I think the program is about 8 weeks long, and it's on how to build your super connector VIP network, and build those relationships. And it's a online virtual program, but it's just really, really great. And it takes a lot of what Keith has believed in and developed over the years, and they've now brought this into a really, really effective and successful program. So I guess it's just another plug, but not unintended, but it's really valuable since we're talking about relationships.
All right, so let's talk about another key principle that you use, which is co-elevation, which you described as a social contract where colleagues become trusted teammates. So it's moving, I guess, from the coworker in the cubicle next door or in the Zoom window next door, as it might be these days, to actually becoming more of somebody that you know and trust. And I guess in some respects, some would say almost treat like family.
Well, yeah, and it's a great question because it flows very well after what we've just been talking about, and that is relationships. And whether it's in a team, whether it's in a family or friends, or whether it's in a peer group, which is also something where co-elevation is important. It's co-elevation is elevating the energy, the trust, the collaboration, the inspiration, the authenticity of everyone, but we're doing it in a sort of a collective manner. So we don't leave anybody behind. We support everybody. We don't isolate, and we celebrate the victories. And so what this co-elevation is actually the antidote to a silo mentality in organizations, which is so destructive. And they're there because of traditional hub and spoke or command and control type of leadership. But when people embrace this co-elevation mindset, um, it's really, I think it's just another way of peeling back the onion on what is a real, true friendship or relationship. And I just love the term because it's so descriptive. It's like co-elevating. We're all rising together. We're elevating, we're expanding, we're becoming more emergent. The whole group or the team is becoming a generative action or a generative initiative. It's a powerful word, and it's something that I embrace and I hold dearly, and I try hard not to overuse it because it is such a powerful word.
Now, I'm thinking about operating systems like EOS, for example, and how operating systems, they give the company a recipe to follow for success, right? And there's one for meetings, right? The weekly L10 meeting, and there's, it starts off, you want to create great intention, you start off, share some wins, right? Started on a positive note. Okay, that's great. And then there's a section where, okay, connect and collaborate. Let's pick some topics to collaborate on and move them forward collectively. But that is not the same as what you just talked about, that co-elevation element. It's maybe the EOS people who wrote that system thought it was implicit. And this is not a criticism of EOS, by the way. It works great, and I highly recommend it. Among others, if a company's not running on any operating system, it is a good one. There are others out there, but it doesn't go to that extra layer of depth, Kim, that you're talking about with co-elevation, it sounds like. And it's interesting that is not, it's not written out as part of the recipe. It's more of a literally a recipe, add 2 cups of this, mix for X minutes and bake at this temperature, but it's missing that extra spice or special ingredient. It's almost like when you read at the bottom of a recipe and people comment and like, oh, I added an extra 2 teaspoons of salt and it really made a big difference. It's almost like that part is what the co-elevation might be to add on to the operating system prescription.
I think you really touched on something important, and to go back to sort of borrow from Keith's new book, Never Lead Alone. In peer group learning, why that's so effective is because many have said it, including, McKay CO Forum's CEO and founder, Nancy McKay. She says it's lonely at the top. And I think every CEO would agree with that. Through a teamship lens, there's also this other message, and that is leaders can no longer do it alone. And that has to sink in, because they feel that they have to. They feel, well, that's why I'm being paid the big bucks. That's why I'm been put into this position, because I have to lead the army to war or battle or whatever it is, right? But in today's world, with change happening at hyper speed, it's impossible for one person, even with a very strong C-level suite around them, to do it all themselves and be a part of every decision. So Teamship then says you have to build a teamship mentality, and you have to trust teams to deliver on the executive messaging, and to fulfill the executive purposes, and to make sure that the profitability and the shareholder value and the growth and the market penetration, all of those things that are vitally important to businesses, are done through the lens of teamship, along with strong, powerful, inspiring leadership. And so it's a key piece of the puzzle, I think, today.
So let's double click on tactics, and maybe if you could think of one tip that you can give, business leaders and fractionals that they can bring back to their clients today to start that journey of infusing teamship, dismantling the silos, challenging groupthink, to use your language. What would that one tip be to get things starting to move towards that other path?
I think it's, and you use the word tactical, so that means that we can drop into the weeds a little bit. I think it's to engage with, and I assume that a lot of very progressive executives, and certainly CEOs, have executive coaches. So and so I think that there's a good opportunity that starts right there to um, make sure there are no obstacles in the way to then put a spotlight on teamship and to explore that, regardless of how well it's known, how well it's embraced, and reach out to find either within the organization that their leadership coach comes from, or find a team coach to, if nothing else, ask the questions. Start with, how do your this is your C-suite or your executive team or an important team, how do they view their roles? How do they view their input? Are they being heard? Do they feel safe? Or are they just going through motions? And that's really all done through an assessment. And team effectiveness assessments are not part of the plethora of all these other assessments that are out there, from Briggs Myers
Yes.
and Highlands and all these other ones. And those are all great. They're important and they play into it. But I have found that having teams get exposed to too many assessments diverts all their attention on their performance and meeting some artificial requirement or level of how they perform or how they interact or how they succeed as a team member. But I think the assessment is important. And what I do with my assessments is that I work with, at the very least, the sponsor and maybe a team lead and maybe the whole team. And we create from a list of questions, and they're broken down into sort of stages of team development. And I make the team assessment with the team members. Now, that's not on day one, but I think it's important that the leaders get a reality check on how their team members view their roles on teams. And of course, that comes right back to self-awareness. Can you hear that? Are you ready to hear that? Because if you don't want to hear it, then that's not going to work, right? But you've got to realize that the team is not functioning as a high performance team. And why is that? And if somebody is in there sucking all the oxygen out, or somebody's in there just making people go through a set of procedures and following a process, well, that's not really a team, because you want the team to take ownership of pretty well everything within that mandate. And remember, I'm not saying this for you to remember, but it's important for the organization to remember that everybody on that team has a day job. They have a role, they have a responsibility, job description. They're getting paid according to that. As a team member, they've coalesced around something else, something bigger, something more important. And this is where the real magic is lying dormant. And so it's not business as usual. The team has to have the power and the support and the autonomy to drive towards success and achieving the goals that are laid out in front of them.
So it sounds like a team leadership assessment is kind of like the gateway drug to greater self-awareness among the leadership team and hopefully to everybody on the team as well.
Yeah, well, and I would say it doesn't really just limit itself to the team leadership, because you have one team lead. I think a team assessment should be given to every member. But before one would jump on that, I think you would want to have some frank discussions with someone who's experienced in managing teams, taking them from a dysfunctional state to a high performing state, and have the interviews with the team lead and a few people, and perhaps even the CEO or the president of the organization, so that they're prepared again to act upon they cannot do it alone. It just comes back to that question, where it's lonely at the top and you can no longer do it alone. You just simply can't today.
You
And
can't and you shouldn't. It just doesn't make sense. Somebody who insists on doing it alone is I don't know. Is it a stretch to say they're on the way to being a authoritarian dictator?
well, they've already come from that rock, and so I think they're just trying to, pay lip service to a lot of changes, and it's difficult, especially for founders who have started a team and they've been absolutely amazing entrepreneurs, taking a company to some level of 20, 50, 100 million, but the potential is there for order of magnitude of 10, 100 times more, but they need to either step out of the way or at least recognize what's holding them back. And that teamship mindset is really, really important. And I think that's where it has to begin. And you can give that role to HR. You could give that role to some C-level or senior VPs. And that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, that will plateau because you don't know if the internal management is part of the problem, like in blind spots. They're just totally unaware that they actually are impeding the performance and the effectiveness of their teams and hence the whole organization.
Yeah, and we've had a number of fractionals on this podcast who have come in and told us about experiences where they start with a new client and they see, they're hired to fix their marketing or their operations or their finances, and it just becomes clear as day to them after being with the company just for a short while that actually the problem is none of those. The problem is leadership. The problem is the people, etc. And it's so often the case. So it's definitely a blind spot in many cases. Kim, something else is really interesting about your approach and your coaching is you shared with me that about 80% of the time you start off your coaching sessions with mindfulness or some kind of grounding exercise. And I want you to talk about that. That's unique. And I'm sure there's some crowds you're coaching who are maybe not as receptive to that or not as familiar with that. So tell us a little bit about what does that look like, and how do you also, if you kind of read the room and after you say, okay, we're gonna do you go right into it, or do you kind of take a survey, like who here has meditated before? How does that work?
Well, yeah, so that's a great question, and it's all of the above. I think just with anybody, the question that I pose and I just put out there is, and it's often introduced through a check-in. A lot of meetings and a lot more people are using check-ins. A great one is sweet and sour. So let's go around the room. Give me, one word on what's really going well in your life, and one word that's you're challenged with, or things that are a little bit rocky. So I'm inspired and uncertain. So what this does is you go around the room and everybody just realizes you're uncertain. Like, oh my God, you come across as so confident, right? So now they've got a new data point. And so then people start to realize we're all human beings. And as to your point at the beginning of the interview, you talked about, that we don't pay attention to how people are really feeling. And so that's, you've got to at some point break that ice, especially in a team setting. But at the very least, I will say, okay, so and I always ask for permission. That's key. Mm-hmm. Like, would everybody be okay to just take a few deep breaths? Let's just, it's been a busy week and you guys didn't get that big contract you were hoping for. Everybody's a little uptight. Let's just collectively just chill out and just take a few deep breaths. And if you want, I can kind of guide you a little bit, and we don't get esoteric. It's just, let's just take a minute and become present collectively. And then, usually it's like, oh, that felt good. That was good. And I don't, at that point, I don't even know where everybody's mindset is at, right? But it's just a natural thing. And I'll say, well, next time we meet, we can go a little deeper if you want. Well, just breathing, and talk a little bit about breathing, why breathing is so important. And then I say, well, do you want to explore a little bit more of a grounding or centering kind of exercise that I would encourage you to take into your own meetings, not just here for the team coaching meetings or even the one-on-one. It's the same kind of dialogue, and that's how it happens. And I may have shared with you, but it's happened on numerous occasions where I've started the practice, and then for whatever reason, whether it's one-on-one with a leader or in a team environment, you just can't, for some reason, you just jump right into the issues. And then someone in the room will say, hey, wait a minute, let's do that grounding exercise. We got to have this, right? And that person maybe 4 or 5 meetings ago was like, well, I don't want to do this. This sounds like too California to me, right?
Too woo-woo. Well, you got them hooked.
But, and so it has to happen organically, but people get it. And you meet them, you meet your clients where they are, and you let them, guide it.
So kind of dovetailing off of that, and this is a bit of a philosophical question. I know you describe yourself as a seeker of quantum energy. And I know that also you're a big user of AI. You're all in on AI. So how do you square these two very different ideas of, deep human energetic connection and then all this artificial machine stuff? Well, how do you reconcile that?
Wow. Okay. So this is where I tend to ramble, and I'm often accused of my emails are a little bit too long when I'm not really focused on being succinct. So I will be succinct. It's so easy now to just explore about, what are we made up of? And, I remember going to school and we were told that we're really just all water. Really? We're all water? Like, that was amazing. And now, of course, we're 99.999 to the, 30th, factor. We're space. We're space. That's all we are. And so then you wonder, well, how come I can't walk through a wall? Well, it's because there's electromagnetic, energies and frequencies, and the quantum it's messing around with particles and waves and all that. The whole point is that without going on the esoteric side, we are energy. And if we even just kind of are aware of our consciousness, of a super consciousness, and if you feel more comfortable going into a faith or a religion or a belief, fine. It's not about that. It's just the quantum energy field and quantum mechanics, I think, is so fascinating because there's so much we don't know. And yet it's science. It's rooted in science, and we're spending a lot of time on understanding it more and more. And what's coming out of quantum energy is the string theory. And this is all, I find this really, really interesting. So that's what attracts me to the quantum space. How do I reconcile that with, AI? Well, it's really interesting is that AI for me is helping this part of ourself, our minds. It's cognitive, and it's an incredibly powerful tool. AI, it will go into a huge database to try and mimic our emotions and our consciousness, and make us, especially the less mature mind, feel that it is actually nurturing us emotionally. but it's giving us what we want. And a big part of that is that as a human being, we also need to give, to be generous. And I think this is why um, the very, like the teenagers and young adults who are now getting really close to AI as a companion, and feeling that they can become more friends with with AI than they can with the people in their class or in their on the street, is because they're not having to deal with all the negativity that they get, the bullying and all that kind of stuff. But the problem here is that they think they might be giving something, but it's not really landing anywhere. As a human being, we need to give as well as receive. And this is where I think it's all breaking down. I think as we're a little bit more mature, but not always, we realize the limitations of AI. So a lot in my circle, people are very excited about AI and they don't worry about it because they know that it's a machine. It's just logic, and it's bits and bytes. It's digital, and it can look and try and fool me into thinking it's a human, but it's not. And I think that why I appreciate AI is because of coming back to some of the EQ skills, the soft skills that are so important and that can be really introduced and upheld and anchored through teamship. AI is going to have a really hard time with that. And I think that for another complete reason is that people who are able to have emotional agility and self-awareness and understand authenticity and being genuine and understanding what love is, not the romantic love, but the deep love, through a consciousness, there's nothing to fear with AI, right? So this is really, for me, has to happen in parallel. And I love some of our speakers within the McKay CEO Forum's speaker pool, some people who are highly technical, but are also talking a lot about mindfulness and, the ability to, be self-aware and recognizing these other EQ related skills. They're happening in parallel. So that's sort of the quick triad mix that I kind of live in. And listen, I'm just dipping my toes and my fingers into this. I'm not really deep into anything except probably more on the mindfulness side, because I think that's the really important part. Does that answer the question? I have no idea. I think I just went all over the map.
Well, when I ask AI to summarize everything you just said, I'm sure it'll come out with something that makes sense. No, I'm just kidding. That was good, Kim. I think you tied it all together there. And for me, I was going to ask you, I haven't tried this, but it makes me think I should. Have you ever tried using AI to guide a meditation? Because I think AI would be really good at that. And that's one of the best ways to combine the two. Let AI do what it's good at, which is prompting you and kind of asking the questions, but it then is back over to you to do all the thinking and the being self-aware and reaping the benefits of what AI is kind of setting up for you.
I a year ago, or even more, in the early days of Chat GPT, I played around with it, but I realized that when I meditate, or even if I just do some quick grounding, I'm going inside. And again, I'm out of my mind. I'm not thinking this through. And so for AI to know how I'm reacting or responding or feeling consciously, like it just can't do that. Like, it's so easy to put out a question to AI that it has no clue. It doesn't even understand the question. Right. But it's very powerful and it can help us so much. But as soon as you go into some other parts of our inner workings of consciousness, it just, it'll search them, and it'll pull out amazing research and um, you know, presentation notes and things like that on this and how this is all related. But again, it's just regurgitating what very thoughtful people have said or written. So it's, yeah, it's, yeah, I think that to get to start, to begin to meditate, for example, to recognize what you have to do to follow the steps, it's all very powerful. But I don't think that my AI bot is going to guide me through some deep meditation because it has no sensing ability.
I mean, we could argue about this all day and night. I will just end it with saying that I have used apps where it's not AI, but it's the guide who's pre-recorded what he's going to say, and it's just timed out. If you want to do a 10-minute meditation, it's going to be 45 seconds between everything he says, and you want to do 20 minutes, it's going to be a minute and a half. But it's already predefined what that guide is going to say, and I've tried that, and it's good. So I can see that, and that's a human voice recorded. Like, okay, well, if it's a human voice, why not an AI voice? What's the difference at that point? I guess it also depends what your style of meditation is. That's really specific for guided meditation. If you're somebody who likes, just silence, or maybe just one prompt at the beginning and maybe, very little interaction, then maybe that's not what it's.
I listen to guided meditation occasionally. I think it's fine. You find the right person that you can connect with, the right voice. It's coming from the right space for you. I think it's amazing to do that. I often find though, if doing any kind of guided meditation, I have no idea where it's going because I'm picking up that collective energy of the room. Like where is everybody, right? And if people are getting into it, I'm just kind of like going with it, and not that I'm doing anything weird and wonderful like levitating or anything like that, but it's just I have no idea, and it could be just where I feel I am at, and so that's what guides the meditation. But that's not a big part of who I am. It's just an important part. And I think that it comes back to this self-awareness again, like who are we? It really helps to spend a little time on that question.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, Kim. So let's wrap this up with the final question. If you could put one message on a billboard for millions of business leaders and CEOs to see every day as they drive by it or walk by it on the highway of life, what would that message be?
I think it would be believe in your inner awareness. Trust your inner awareness.
Trust your inner awareness.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, Kim. Thank you so much for sharing and for your time with us today. How can people connect with you?
Well, they can go onto my website. There's even a way to set up a quick call. But they can easily, and are you going to post my email address?
Yes, we'll have all your contact info in the show notes as well.
Right. So they can reach out to Tofin at breakoutcx.com. I'm easy to find, also easy to connect. Well, probably can't connect with me directly on the McKay Seal Forums site. That's maybe takes a little bit more effort, but they can connect with you to find me if they really want me.
Be my pleasure to connect anybody with Kim.
And I so appreciated this, Rob. It was a joy, and I had no idea where the conversation was going, and
me neither.
It was great. So thank you for having me on.
Thanks so much, Kim. Thanks for joining us here on the Fractional Pros Canada podcast.
All right. Take care.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. If you're a fractional professional based in Canada, we'd love to have you join us in the Fractional Pros Canada Facebook group, the home for Canada's fractional community. It's where Canadian fractional executives connect, share insights, and help each other succeed. Until next time, I'm Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO. May your impact be full-time, even if your hours are fractional.